I ate sushi at a janky Chinese buffet. I remember the tuna roll was warm. Less than 3 hours later I was sick to my stomach and couldn't stop shivering. I'm sitting at work and people were just asking me if I was okay. I went home and just curled up in a blanket, shivering. Now, to add difficulty level to this, I was effectively homeless at this time. I was building a cabin on land while living in it. No roof, just plastic over the top. Roof was next. It's the middle of December and 7 degrees out. And I was. You know those fever dreams, where you lose all sense of whether you are awake or not, and normal things are suddenly bizarre and bizarre things are suddenly just normal? That was me for 24 hours, while I fought off this illness and hypothermia. I think the fever kept me alive, really. I couldn't even stock the clay pot I called a stove with wood to stay warm. I was too weak to lift the blankets. Anyway, I called into work for the next 2 days and eventually started just sucking it up and going to work. I still felt just as bad, but I was used to it. I should also mention I hadn't shit in a week and couldn't eat. Just absolute death's door. I was totally pale, always on the verge of passing out, and freezing no matter what I did. And trying to poop only managed to push out a teaspoon of tar. Finally after a week and a half I asked the girl I had been dating if I could spend a day at her place to stay warm. She knew I was sick and wanted to nurse me to health anyway, so this was a win for her. I used her bathroom that night, and after 45 minutes of struggle I finally got a massive black tar out crap jet black like a rocket ship. This took all my energy, having not eaten hardly for almost 2 weeks, and I barely managed to shower and pass out in her bed but naked. Called in the next day despite feeling way better, because I was so hungry and tired and not interested in working. And that's the story of how I survived food poisoning that I really feel like should have killed me. I spilled boiling water on my lap while I was camping in the middle of nowhere. I had severe burns covering 30% of my body and had no cell service, nor could I find the keys to my car. My boyfriend at the time found a park ranger who then radioed for an ambulance. It took nearly an hour for the ambulance to show up and another hour to reach the hospital. I was going into shock while waiting for the ambulance, and a very nice woman managed to keep me awake until the ambulance arrived. I was in the hospital for 4 days in the ICU before being discharged. I had skin grafts and the burns took nearly a year to fully heal. I still don't like to strain pasta or carry hot pans for fear of burns. I was flying with my grandpa to the Oshkosh flying in a small Piper Cub one year. Now, this event is massive, like multiple thousand different planes in the air at the same time, so air traffic control is basically follow the pattern, don't fly into people. Well, someone didn't get the message, because all of a sudden there's a wah bang as a plane about twice our size flies over top of us. There was a noticeable vibration that wasn't there before, so we figured our prop had clipped them. It was noticeable, but not severe enough to worry about imminently crashing, so one made a call, and about 5 minutes later we were on the ground. Turns out there was about 2 inches missing from the tip of one of the propeller blades, and I found out later the people that hit us had damaged their landing gear to the point that they actually ran off the runway, otherwise they were fine. The part that really stuck with me, though, I was the pilot in command at the time, and just before they hit us, I distinctly remember looking at the altimeter, seeing we were a touch low, and began pulling up to raise our altitude. If I had done that 5 seconds earlier, or if we had happened to be 2 feet higher, I'd almost certainly be dead. I was snowmobiling in northern Michigan, through these deserted dome and cherry orchards. Between orchards was usually dense forest with narrow paths through them, and everything is covered in thick snow in January, because Michigan. My riding partner was ahead of me, and entered a forest path as we came to the end of an orchard. We were going pretty fast, and I only slowed a little as I entered the path, as the way ahead was straight. As I went in, he exited the path a short ways ahead into another orchard. I followed. Foolishly, I hit the gas and began to accelerate before I'd exited the forest, as I could see the way ahead was clear. For anyone who hasn't been snowmobiling, they are powerful machines, like motorcycles on snow. So I accelerated to around 40 miles per hour, about 65 kilometers per hour, in a very short distance, before I had even cleared the forest. Before I knew what was happening, I was thrown straight up into the air. I saw pine branches and needles brushed past my coat, then a surreal moment of zero gravity, just before falling straight back down. I heard an enormous explosion, and I cried out as I saw the forest floor rushing up to meet me. Seeing that I was falling what appeared to be a body breaking distance downwards, I thought it looked like 40 feet, but it was probably much less. But instead of breaking my neck, I landed on my side with my arms instinctively covering my head. Amazingly, the snow had broken my fall, and I was fine. The explosion I heard was the snowmobile. It had crashed directly into a huge pine tree just to the side of the trail. The entire front of it looked like someone put a grenade in the engine block. Turns out, my right skid had hit a log just under the snow, snapping it off and sending the vehicle into a centrifugal spin while still going forward at more or less its original velocity. The spin is what threw me upwards. If I had remained on it and not been thrown clear, my chest cavity would probably have resembled the disintegrated snowmobile. Except squisher. You can bet I felt like a lucky bastard that day. When I was younger, about 10 years old, I fell out with a kid and he ended up pushing me from behind into traffic. Luckily the bus driver had quick reactions and hit the brakes hard. Ended up stopping a fair distance from me in retrospect, but as a kid that shit traumatized the fuck out of me, and I still feel really uncomfortable when people go behind me. Incorporated family. When I was 7, I visited my grandparents. They had a dog this time, and I petted him before I wanted to go to bed. He has always been a bit aggressive, and so it came that he suddenly jumped on me and bit my arm very hard. He barely let go of it. I didn't feel any pain at this point, probably from shock. That's why I thought everything was fine. I didn't see the wound. BC I wore a thick pullover, and I wanted to go to bed. But my mom heard the sound of his growling and came up to me to ask if everything was fine. I just pointed on my arm and she pulled me with her to check. Turned out my arm was almost ripped off and I could have bled out if I just went to bed like I wanted to. So thank you mom for noticing. About 6 years ago, during the last day of my senior year Christmas break, being a typical guy engrossed in gaming, I was up all night. Well, my mother then woke me up an hour later saying drive me to work. Didn't have my own car still, and you can get your school stuff done like haircut, new clothes, etc. I was alright most of the day, got my stuff done, had a nice time with my sister. Then went to see a friend at his work, since it was on the way home. Spent a few hours there till my C's home, and went back out. The end my best friend calls me to hop online and it's about 5 PM by now, so I head home, and 5 minutes in all I feel is a abrupt feeling, like going over a speed bump real fast. Turned out I fell asleep at the wheel, went off the road, and rammed a tree, destroying the car on the passenger side as I climb out, and hit the ground. Oh no, my leg broke. IDK if I was in shock or not, cause I was in pain, but I was pretty calm. I never freaked about it to this day, and had a off-duty nurse and officer behind me to help get the M's and check on me, and call my mother for me. And I'm airlifted into Atlanta for emergency surgery, which didn't happen until 11 PM that night. So yay, getting rolled over on your broken leg to be prepped for surgery is not nice. BTW. When I got home and recovered, I eventually realized, hey, I fucking survived. I ended up doing PT and was able to walk for my graduation. Albeit I have a permanent limp and some of fingers are fucked, I'm perfectly capable of almost everything. PSC ended up putting a titanium femur with 4 screws in my leg, and my hand had rods to hold my bones in place while it healed. When they took the rods out, my hand tickled on the inside. Weirdest feeling in the world to me. One time, I was swimming at my friend's place. I started playing in the shallow end, but I accidentally drifted into the deep end. I don't know how to swim, so I was trying frantically to get to the edge. I yelled for help, but the guys watching us didn't care. There were several of my friends nearby, but none of them cared. There was nothing to grab onto, and my head was 100% submerged. I half walked, half tried to swim to the edge. I couldn't get to air, and I thought about just accepting my fate and dying. Finally, I reached the edge. I just slowly pulled myself out and went back to the shallow end, but I'll never forget how terrified I was. I couldn't even think then, because I panicked. I'm very afraid of deep water now. Back in 2012, I was driving my friend and I to go get some food. We were sitting at a stoplight, first car, and I can remember looking out the side window then hearing my friend scream. I turned back just in time to see a semi-wrecker hit us head on. Turns out the guy wasn't paying attention at the opposite end of the intersection, which stopped at the bottom of a hill. So he was going a decent speed. There were no brake marks either. His semi pushed my car back into 3 other cars and a moped before landing on top of my car, one wheel going through the ceiling down the middle console, so barely missing mine and my friend's head. Most of the other people involved walked away with minor enough injuries. My friend had some stitches and a lot of bruising. The man on the moped had toes amputated and had to be taken to the hospital for internal injuries. I was taken to a hospital for broken ribs, collapsed lung, and a brachial spelling plexus on my arm. Nerve function was not working, so I couldn't use my arm/shoulder fully for almost a year. Still hate semis. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more daily 6 PM Reddit uploads.